When I moved to Victoria from Edmonton, one of the things that I was most excited for was seeing the ocean and smelling the ocean and just being like surrounded by the ocean here and being either a 10-minute drive or a 10-minute walk away from the ocean was just like something that really appealed to me. And one of the things that, didn't surprise me about the ocean, but really intrigued me about it was the culture surrounding the ocean. It's not just the water and being able to see it, but it's what the ocean invites, and that is exploration through many ways, like whether that's surfing, kayaking, kiteboarding, cold dips. There's just so much that the ocean provides, other than fishing or food or anything like that. And that's something that I was really excited about upon moving to Victoria.
Well, there's a lot of people who are in your position where they're coming from the mainland somewhere, a landlocked place like Edmonton maybe, and they have, as you did, this vision of when I'm breathing in the salt air, when I'm seeing that stretch of blue, when I'm feeling it all around me, when I'm around like-minded people with this kind of ocean lifestyle, it'll be a whole change for me. Is that what ended up happening for you?
Going on my 4th year living on Vancouver Island in Victoria, I'm now like an avid surfer. Every New Year's I go for a cold dip to celebrate the new year. There's just kind of cultural markers of living by the ocean. It's just synonymous with the Pacific Northwest, synonymous with Victoria, synonymous with Vancouver Island. If you talk to people, whether they're bands or musicians that are coming over from Vancouver to tour in Victoria, and you ask them like what was the most the coolest part about that, they usually cite the ferry over and how beautiful that journey is. And part of that is just being surrounded by the ocean, the islands, and all that.
I almost feel more on the island when I'm on the ferry, literally not on the island, than when I'm living in the city, because you have, as you say, the Gulf Islands around you, the salt air coming in, the bird calls, sometimes you even see whales, and the trees, the pine trees, it just feels so Pacific Northwest. It feels like somewhere specific, somewhere Pacific. But then once you get off the ferry, you get on the bus, or you get in your car, you come down the peninsula, you return to your life, you're just in the city, like any city. And yeah, you can go down to Dallas Road, but it's not this islandy, oceany place that it seems like when you're on that journey.
I think that's like a key difference between maybe a typical beach town in Nicaragua or Costa Rica or Indonesia, where the ocean is the focal point. It's Victoria, it ends up being the city, and you end up doing city things, and you can easily be a city rat in Victoria, just like maybe being a stand-up comic or a musician and only going out at night or something like that. I mean, even when you're in the city of Victoria, you may come across a VW van with surfboards strapped to the top, and you usually can go, I know where they're going, or there are little communities like in Esquimalt of boaters, of people who live on their boats or sail to different parts of the world and then come back to Victoria. I was even in Hawaii last November, and I was paddleboarding around Hilo, and I saw a sailboat and it said Victoria, BC.
Yeah.
And he was sitting on his boat, and I went, hey, that's where we're from. And it was cool to see that connection that the ocean provided. And that can be across the world, and we're also connected in many ways. And I think the ocean and its culture is one way that a surfer in Sombrio Beach can be connected to a surfer in Indonesia. And that's kind of a beautiful thing.
Of course, and we're talking about a connection as well that goes back millennia. We had seafaring nations all around the island and the coastline, up to kind of what you're talking about, of just these casual connections recreationally between people from all over the world who have been living in places that are on the water and develop these kind of ways of life around the water and being able to go in it and enjoy it. And you talk to a few people who are doing just that. And you went up to some of those places that we were talking about, Sombrio Beach, Jordan River, to talk about it, right?
Yeah, Sombrio Beach is a place just in the past year since getting into surfing that I've been so frequently. It's just become like it's over an hour, but honestly, it feels like 10 minutes to get there because you're just so excited and you usually wake up so early in the morning. So I've been there a lot and just getting to know that place and how much history it's been through from interviewing Paul Manly, who made an awesome documentary about Sombrio Beach, its cultures throughout the 70s and up until the 90s. He's now a Nanaimo city councilor. So he's always been an insider on what's going on in Vancouver Island. And then talking to Kevin Greenwood on his boat about the race to Alaska, which he did with some family members and a friend. It's a non-powered boat race. They start in Port Townsend in Washington. They come to Victoria, and then they go out and go up to Alaska, and totally non-powered. You know, I went on this boat. It's quite small, as you'll see, and there's 6 of them there, and it really showcases, and what I kind of talk to them about is how, while the ocean does provide a lot of calmness or poetry, the ocean, like poetry, can be also difficult and challenging and violent, and there's a lot of yin and yang to the ocean, and it's almost like a beast you need to tame. And these 2 stories in particular, while there's so many stories about the ocean, about people's connection to it, I talking to these people in particularly was interesting because they had such a unique perspective, either subjectively or objectively.
Should we talk to some of these folks and hear what they had to say?
Let's talk to them. I'm Ryan Hook.
And I'm Cam Welch.
And this is Island Sound and Story. As a 3.5-year transplant onto Vancouver Island, one of the things that I loved about it was the fact that there's surfing. And one of those spots is Sombrio. So can you tell me a little bit about your Sombrio documentary? I just found it on YouTube and was like, this is a fascinating documentary. Can you tell me about it?
I first went to Sombrio Beach when I was 16 years old. And back then you had to hike from the highway all the way down to the beach. And it was a beautiful emerald forest. It was a pristine old growth forest. And it was really amazing, just magical place when I was a kid. And I remember going down there, and there was a community of folks living down there when I first went down and camped.
The beach evolved into a community of different types of people that each had different cabins, and we each acquired about 100 yards each. The cabins were all spaced by, I call chainsaw distance. Noise wouldn't bother me if my neighbor started his saw or chopped his wood and had a dog or anything that was, it was a nice distance. We each had a ranch, so to speak.
We were the caretakers here. Mike's explained that to you. People would say, "Oh, I'm going to build a shack right next to yours," and we would tell them, "Hey, this isn't downtown. There's lots of room. Why don't you just spread out?" Plus it keeps things cleaner.
Since the arrival of the first squatters in the late 60s, a number of interesting characters have come and gone from the beach. By the early 90s, there were a dozen or more cabins, and between 20 and 30 residents.
Over the years, I lived in Ontario for a while, and when I came back, I went to Sombrio, sought it out again, and they logged it out and had a road down to the bottom, and it was a quick, easy hike in there. And I got to know the folks living on the beach, like Rivermouth Mike and Steve Johnson and Barbara, Barb Oak, and I knew some of the other folks down there. And I always wanted to make a documentary about Sombrio Beach. But Rivermouth Mike always said, if you bring your camera down here, Paul, it might fall in the ocean, and then, it won't work anymore. And so they always just discouraged me from documenting the situation down there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I always just respected that. They didn't want more attention to the scene that they had going on down there. And then I guess it was 96, when everything started to come apart, I got hit by a car riding my bicycle in Vancouver and fractured C5 in my neck. And so I was in a 4-post neck brace sitting at home, watching on the news that the park had been created and everybody was getting cleared out. And then the next year I went down there with my girlfriend, my wife now, for my birthday, and we were hiking down the trail, and Rivermouth Mike was hiking up the trail, and he goes, "Well, we're on a private piece of property." And I said, can I document your story now? And he said, "Yeah, for sure." So I happened to have my video camera in the van, and I ran back up and got it. And we were camping out there for just a couple of days, and started doing interviews with Steve and Barb and Mike and some of the kids, and then came back with a crew 10 days later, and we camped out there for a week and followed them as they were tearing down their places. I think it was 1998 when I started shooting all of that footage, when I showed up at Sombrio and ran into Rivermouth Mike, and Steve and Barb were starting to take their place down. And then over the years, I was able to collect all that other footage. And then I tried to get funding for a documentary and wasn't successful. I think I raised like $3,000. That was it. So it was pennies on the dollar.
To make for a documentary, that's for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was really like a kind of, I did it really out of love and passion and just care for the place. And it was really just a slice of life for Vancouver Island.
Well, I know I could go in and rent a house or something in town, but it's just not my bag, not my thing. And it's a healthy lifestyle out here. You're always doing something. Carrying kids around, or wood, or water. Save a lot of energy. You really don't have to go far for food. Just paddle out in your canoe. Let go. Mussels off the rocks, whatever. Go fishing.
We have mussels, limpets, gooseneck barnacles. We have chitons, urchins, the odd abalone.
What made it so special?
Well, it's just an amazing, beautiful beach, right? So, you go down there and there's really good breaks for surfing, really nice sandy beach, and then you can hike down to East Beach. And there's actually, back in the day, the trail came down on East Beach. There was a split in it, east and west. We used to just hike down to East Beach, down to where the waterfalls are, and camp out in that area, and then hike to West Beach just to hang out with folks down there. But it's just an amazing, beautiful West Coast beach.
For anyone that maybe might not be familiar with names like Rivermouth Mike and all of this, these are interesting characters, and obviously you saw something in them. What was this village like? Was it just people and characters much like that, just looking for good waves, or what was that like?
It was a real mix of people that were living on the beach. So Rivermouth Mike was originally from North Carolina. And so he had a North Carolina accent, I'm Rivermouth Mike.
He's a rail splitter, likes that cedar, high in the sky, all night.
I chose to live down here because economically it made sense.
He had a shack right on the corner of Sombrio River and the beach, right where they meet. And then he had a a little beachfront workshop, and he would fix people's surfboards there. And then just down the way there was Jesse Oak.
Surfing is more something that you learn on your own. Like you have to put in a lot of your own time into it. So it's hard for somebody to teach you without you having the desire to go learn it.
I don't think anybody ever taught him to surf.
I never really taught him. Just he'd take probably start off with a belly board and a shore break.
Barb and Steve had a pretty big house. It started off as a cabin, and then they added and their family grew down there.
Leah Ray Rose Johnson Oak, and I grew up on Sombrio Beach. I'm 13, and I started surfing when I was 7. That's 6 years ago. And yeah, we usually just hang out and surf and run around and play and skip and have fun.
People just kind of spread out down the beach, and there was people there for different reasons. One fellow that was down there that I knew since I was a kid had schizophrenia, and that was just his peaceful, quiet place to get away from the mayhem of the city. And I think that was a lot of what was going on down there, is people just looking to live an alternative lifestyle and not be in the hustle and bustle of the city. And then there was other folks that just came out there to surf and hang out for the weekend. And people that would come out and stay in a cabin for the summer. And then there was the ones that just stayed there all year round. That was their home.
As opposed to, a typical housing situation where you pay rent to someone. What was that like there? Was it all just you can set up your spot? Was there an initiation, anything like that?
Yeah, I think they had kind of a code, right? So there was enough room to spread out. So don't put your shack right beside mine.
The village itself, like how did it operate?
They would work together to help each other out. They would barter. They would bum rides from each other into town. There was just kind of a system for looking out for each other. There were some folks that would come down there that were on the lam. So there was some fairly rough guys that would come down that they would get engaged in heists or whatever in Victoria, and then run out to Sombrio to hide out for a while. And so they weren't necessarily folks that fit in to the whole community spirit of the place, but it was a bit Wild West, because most of them just wanted to live off the land and be self-sufficient. And some of them were more interested in being communal, and others not. Right, like you take a guy like Rivermouth Mike, and he'll meet and greet everybody that shows up down on the beach, and welcome people and tell them to clean up after themselves, and has no problem with that. It was kind of like the mayor of Sombrio Beach in a way.
Why was Vancouver Island a place that could have a culture like what was created at Sombrio?
I was born and raised on the island, and I'm third generation in this region, and there's always been, the resource industry, like the mining, and then the forestry. It's a temperate climate, so there's a longer growing season. It's easier to do that kind of back to the land homesteading kind of thing. So there's a lot of that going on, and there was a real mix in the community between folks that are involved in forestry and folks that wanted to save the forest. So, in the 80s and 90s, there was a lot of that war in the woods stuff that was going on, trying to protect old growth forests, and the logging community, people trying to protect their jobs. And then there's always been a really good music scene down in Victoria, and back in those days, there was a really good reggae scene. There was reggae festivals on the island. There was a couple of big festivals on the island that we would get a bunch of Jamaican bands to come up. Wow. And that was sort of connected to the same spirit, a lot of folk singers and people that just wanted to live a different style of life than the hustle and bustle of the city.
Counterculture, music, surfing, it all goes hand in hand, it seems, when people think of Vancouver Island especially. Sometimes people hear of surf turf wars. Was there any of that you knew of?
Not really, because it was there was a lot less people back then.
Mm.
Right, so a much smaller population at the time when I was making that film in the late '90s. We've gone through a real boom on the island in especially the last 5 years, but really the last 20 years. There's been a lot of people moving here,
Mm-hmm.
and so I guess that's kind of changed the dynamic a little bit because people are surfing on top of each other now. People like the Brewilers in Tofino. The Oaks, Leah Oak ended up, becoming a surf champion and traveling the world surfing for Team Canada. They would go out and find breaks in really remote parts of the island, and surf off of a boat. Right?
Wow. Yeah. You've mentioned the Oaks a few times now. Maybe you can kind of just tell me their story as well for the viewers.
Well, Steve Johnson came from Huntington Beach in California, and he left. I don't know if he was called up in the draft, but he left before he was drafted for the Vietnam War. He ended up on Sombrio. If I recall correctly, Barb Oak was from Souk area, and they got together and they both had kids from previous relationships. And they had a bunch of kids down there. So I can't remember how many were born right on the beach. I think 6 of them.
Wow.
Were born right down there on the beach. So they would have a midwife that came down. And interesting, like the midwife, I've met her a number of times. She lives up in this area. That, she would go down and help Barb give birth, and kids were born right down on the beach and started surfing at young ages and just, learned to live in that kind of back to the land sort of way, right?
Mm-hmm. How would you compare Sombrio then versus now?
Well, now it's a park,
mm-hmm.
and it's packed. There's lots of people that go there. And Victoria, the Capital Regional District, has really grown.
Mm-hmm.
So there's way more people on Vancouver Island now than 25, 30 years ago. And
mm-hmm.
so, there's just a lot more people down
mm-hmm.
there crowding into camp. So it's quite different. There used to just be a lot of solitude down there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. A lot more unbeaten paths, you could say. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and for those that might not know too, what happened to the Sombrio Surf Village?
So in 1996, I can't remember what year it became a park. It might have been 94. It became a BC park, part of the Juan de Fuca Rec Trail.
Mm-hmm.
And in 1996, everybody was given notice to move out.
This beach has given us 20 years of happiness, whatever. And it's payback time. Tear down the house, clean it up, make it look like a park.
And so then the Parks Department just came in and they hired contractors to just come in and take everybody's stuff out. So if people hadn't packed up and taken their stuff, then they came in with a helicopter and just loaded everything up and hauled it on out. Steve and Barb and their kids and Rivermouth Mike lived on a small piece of private land. So just at the corner of the river and the beach, there was a chunk of private land that was owned by a family in Seattle. And so when the Parks Department came in to clear everybody out, they couldn't clear them out because that was private land and they had no authority to do that. And so they struck a deal with the landowners and to just pay rent and stay there as long as they could. And then the landowners eventually made a deal with the BC government to add that piece of property to the park.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I mean, it could have gone another way. It could have ended up with a resort down there or something, but
yes,
the BC government wasn't going to allow them to put a road access in
right
to that piece of land. So
right. So it's kind of bittersweet in some ways, like for the people like Rivermouth Mike and the Oaks and everybody that lived there. What were their, obviously they're losing their home, so that is not great. But was there a sense of, ephemerality with it? Like, did they expect that, the dream couldn't live on forever, or what were they feeling?
They always suspected that the dream wasn't going to live on forever,
Yeah.
Yeah, they just soaked up life as it was. So it used to be 7 years. If you were on the land for 7 years and established yourself, you could claim squatters' rights. And I know some folks whose grandmother jumped off a train beside a lake in Whistler and built a house, cabin, and now a big house right beside a lake in Whistler, and that property's worth millions of dollars, right? And here in Nanaimo, up on first and second lake, there's a whole bunch of cabins on the lakes there that were obtained through squatters' rights. And then we have Shack Island, just off of Neck Point, Piper's Lagoon parks, where there's a bunch of shacks on islands, and those were all obtained through squatters' rights.
Wow.
Way back when. So the folks that went and stayed on Sombrio, they were too late to do that. I think it's 70 years now or something. It's really like it's completely out of reach. You can't do it anymore.
Obviously, you made this documentary, and you know all these people. Do you keep in touch with any of these people, and do you know kind of what happened? The years after Sombrio Beach became a park and all of that.
I haven't seen Rivermouth Mike in a few years now, because he's in Port Renfrew. Barb's still in Port Renfrew. Steve, if you watch the film, he died, and as did some of the kids, and I'm friends with some of them on Facebook, some of the kids, so I see what Leah is up to here, there, and everywhere. She's got kids now too, so but yeah, I haven't been in touch with them too much in the last bunch of years.
Yeah. In total, how long do you think the Sombrio village was living from start to end? How long do you think?
Well, at least 3 decades.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing. And some people would have been born and raised there, basically. So,
some of those kids had lived there. I think the one daughter who was born there lived there 18 years.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. What a life. What a life.
Yeah.
Yeah. Today, I am in Esquimalt with Kevin Greenwood, who, together with his family and a friend, went to Alaska on a non-powered boat. So they used all types of means, wind, paddle, everything to get to Alaska from Port Townsend in Washington. So today, we are on the Ship of Fools. The ocean can be a pretty unforgiving place, whether you're on a surfboard or a boat. Everybody has their stories. The race to Alaska throws all caution to the wind and makes anyone who takes on its challenge at the mercy of the ocean's cruel ways, but also its beauty. But the ocean is just one obstacle in that challenge. There's six people in here on your race to Alaska.
Right.
How did you make 6 people work in here?
So
there's 3 right now. And
yeah, that's right. So you have to remember that, generally speaking, at any time, 3 people were on watch.
Yeah.
So 3 people have got their heads down, or maybe they're making dinner or what have you. So there's not 6 people down here, generally speaking, all the time, because the plan was that we would just keep going. So we planned to go. We've provisioned the boat for 14 days. That was the idea. As it turned out, we made it in, I think it was 8 days. And that was with a 24-hour layover in Bella Bella. Because at one point it was just so rough out. We said, we're just going to go and stop. And so there was about 4 boats holed up in Bella Bella.
Okay. And these are all other boats in the race.
All in the race, yeah, that's right.
Is there like a big competitive edge
really,
to it?
well,
Like,
not
will people
really,
be like, we
because
should go, we got to win?
it's a serious race, not to be taken seriously.
Right.
Okay, so nobody's in it for the prize, really. I mean, it's fairly well understood which boats are going to win,
Right.
because there'll be like a rocket sled or whatever, and it's going to get the $10,000.
Yeah.
And you can take a fair bet at, who has a shot at the steak knives.
Right.
We knew we weren't going to win it.
Right.
We occasionally might have indulged in the fantasy of winning steak knives,
Right.
but not seriously.
That was one
And
of the prizes.
I mean, you have to remember there are boats like this racing against one person in a kayak.
Mhm.
So you're not really racing each other. They're all they're pretty interesting people, and some of them are far more serious adventurers than we are.
Mm.
There's like some people who have done crazy things like paddleboarded the Northwest Passage or, canoed across Canada.
Right.
And they literally do come from all over the world. So it's a pretty well-known race now. And so they were good company.
And so, yeah, what came over you to do this, and not only do this, but do this with like mostly your family? Some people struggle even being at Thanksgiving dinner. with
Well,
their family.
my brothers and I share ownership in this boat.
Right.
And, but that wasn't really a big part of it. We grew up in Fall River.
Mm.
We'd grown up in Sea Cadets. We'd done quite a lot of, relatively adventurous sailing in our youth and outward bound type stuff.
Mm.
And so that had its appeal. And when this race first came up, I kind of went, oh, that's crazy. But then, a number of things happened. And eventually I kind of went, boy, I would not like to have missed doing that race.
Right.
And so we decided, this is a good solid boat. We should do it. And then, that was the rationale. It was, you think about, you haven't got an engine. Yeah, well, for hundreds of years, people went back and forth between Alaska without an engine. So
Yeah.
it's not as new as it sounds.
Yes. Yeah, it's a
Quite
good
the
point.
opposite,
It's a good point.
The preparations for doing this race involved, first off, making sure the boat was, totally sound.
Yeah.
Doing any running repairs that needed doing.
And like you said, this
Getting-
is a 50-year-old boat.
Yeah, exactly. Getting some equipment that we didn't have. Like we didn't have an EPIRB, emergency position indicating radio beacon.
Mm.
A few other things like that on the safety side. And then into, 14 people, in 14 days, 6 people. How much food is that? How much water is that? Going through all of that. So we expanded the water tanks in the boat.
Mm-hmm.
Put in some extra storage, added some extra solar power. And then there's how are we going to propel a boat without an engine? And a very common way to do it is with a pedal propeller. Right? It's like basically a bike attached to a propeller.
Right.
And where are you going to put that? Well, we thought about putting it in here, and we thought, no, that's going to be crazy because we'll be stepping on. That doesn't work. So eventually, you migrate to something hanging over the stern, like most boats.
Wow.
And it's amazing what you learn. Like this little aircraft propeller, like a model aircraft propeller, about that tall, quite narrow, 2-bladed. You can generate and sustain about 200 watts as a human.
Wow.
And that would push the boat out 1.5 knots,
Right.
which is not very fast.
Yeah, it's
But
enough.
it's enough if there's no current or wind to get from, to the next patch of wind.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't want just that because that's really slow. And I was concerned about maybe being in an anchorage somewhere up north where I needed to turn on a dime. So I wanted oars as well.
Mm-hmm.
So we built 2 big oars and the outriggers to carry them. And with those and the pedal, we could maybe make 2 and a bit knots,
Mm-hmm.
right? Not very fast.
Right.
But as it turned out, all of that work to do all of that, which was necessary, the hardest row we had was getting out of Victoria Harbor.
Really?
Yeah, a big westerly in the face.
Mm.
And it was trying to get out to where you could actually hoist the sails. After that, day one, the wind did get a bit patchy, and we rode a little bit. We made it through Active Pass before the tide turned. That's the last time we rode or pedaled the whole race.
The ocean commands a lot of respect.
Sure.
And if you don't respect it, it will hurt you and consume you. And it's very poetic in that sense. And that's what you kind of touched on, is like it's almost like it's the yin and the yang of the ocean when you respect it and know what you're doing and are able to listen to it and its wind and Mother Nature and all that.
Even when you know what you're doing, you can make a bad decision. And I think that's something that I'm kind of keenly aware of. And so, later that night, I was off watch, and I'm trying to sleep there, and you could it's getting really dodgy up there. They're trying to get the third reef in the main, which we should have really. Problem was, there's the forecast and there's what you've got, right? So you go, well, okay, it's supposed to get rough, but there's nothing right now. There's nothing. Well, the wind went from nothing to too much in a hurry.
Wow.
And so now it's dark. They're trying to get the third reef in, and in the course of it, they're putting a bit of a rip in the main. And, I'm down here going, yeah, I don't think this is a good idea. I think we'll turn around. Right. And you kind of go like, there's nothing in this race that, validates exceeding a certain risk threshold.
Right.
Right. So that was very disappointing in the moment. We're all thinking, man, we were in third place or whatever we were, third or fourth, can't recall, but we were really.
Yeah.
But it turned out to be fantastic, because we go into Bella Bella, and there's 4 other teams there, and we had a great time with them, and that's what the race was about.
Right.
That was, the friendships we made spending sort of 18 hours waiting for the weather to turn in Bella Bella.
Yeah.
Fantastic. It was fantastic on a bunch of accounts. 1, the pure adventure.
Right.
2, for me, it was something I got to do with my son.
Yeah.
Who's, he's 30, but that was fantastic. That was a really, really good experience. And it hadn't been clear in the lead up that he would be able to get the time to come. So the fact that had happened was just a highlight. And the same thing doing it with my brothers and a great team. And we had a lot of laughs.
Would you do it again?
100%. We're gonna.